So your tank's now 2 to 3 years old, you know it inside and out, what it needs for maintenance, how to make adjustments and pull the right levers, and you've dialed in your chemistry to keep fueling its growth. Periodic testing has given you a pulse on your tank parameters, some may even be automated, but continued success every year here on out requires a combination of diligence and a bit of luck, balanced heavily against inevitable issues like human error, simple mistakes, failed equipment, and general complacency that comes with experiencing more wins than fails. But in today's Master Your Neptune Apex episode, I'll show you how to use 9 testing and water parameter alarms and notifications you can use to know the instant that something goes wrong and do something about it. Hey guys, Randy here with BRStv's Guide to Master Your Neptune Apex Controller, where we show you how to use your Apex to improve your equipment's performance. Fair warning, today we're going to share a mind-boggling list of challenges most reefers are going to face, some almost certainly inevitable, some preventable, but most are really just about how quickly you can catch or notice them. So hang in there, and if you make it to the other side of today's video, you'll be able to zero in, catch, and solve almost every common issue before your tank's survival is on the line, with the help of Apex's real-time testing, monitoring, and notifications for pH, calcium, alkalinity, magnesium, oxygen, PAR, salinity, temperature, and ORP. These next 10 minutes could be the most valuable of your reefing career, and I guarantee you'll find at least one, if not several, potential issues today you never thought to check when you know what hits the fan. So let's kick things off with what you should look for when your tank sends you a high or low pH alarm, signaling that something isn't right. Before we run down that laundry list of what that pH alert could mean, let's quickly go over how we set up your Apex to notify you the moment pH falls outside of normal ranges by clicking on the task function icon, find the probe alarm task, choose your pH probe, and adjust the suggested min and max pH ranges if you need to, but unless there's a specific reason to do this, I'll typically stick to what the Apex suggests and hit send. Now, pH alerts are set to warn you when pH is lower than 7.8 and higher than 8.4, meaning you'll receive an email, text, or push notification telling you that there's a problem that needs your immediate attention. But with so many factors that can affect pH, what does that mean, and what should you go looking for as the potential cause? When that high-level pH alarm is triggered, here's what I'm asking myself. Is my 2-part dosing pump or auto top-off with Kalkwasser stuck on, siphoning, or did they fail? Do I need to dial back my CO2 scrubber or add a solenoid to regulate the pH better? Is my refugium light stuck on? Does my pH probe need to be recalibrated or cleaned? On the opposite end of that pH alarm, when there's a sudden drop in pH or my pH is gradually trending downward, questions like, is my calcium reactor regulator stuck open, or is the effluent pump dumping faster than it should? Is my soda ash empty, or did the dosing pump turn off? Does my Kalkwasser stirrer need to be replenished, or is the ATO reservoir empty? Some more low-level pH alert questions. Do I need to change out my CO2 scrubber media, or has something on it failed, or is it clogged? Is my refugium light broken and not turned on? Is there a flow or lighting issue with my refugium, algae scrubber, or algae reactor? Is there too much CO2 in my house that I need to vent out? Do I have enough gas exchange or water circulation in my tank? Is my skimmer not functioning properly or at all? Or again, is my pH probe reading low and need to be calibrated? That's a lot of pH-related failures. Each of them can have a negative effect, but the sooner you can track down the culprit, the sooner you can solve it instead of just hoping that luck will be on your side. When alarms and alerts, including others we'll cover later, are so important to catch no matter what, and you simply cannot afford to miss them, whether you're sleeping, eating, playing, or your phone isn't around or it doesn't wake you up, you can use a loud audible alarm like a cheap radio, horn, or even one of these cool alarms from Adaptive Reef made specifically for the Apex to warn you when your tank is on the line. All you need to do is plug your loud warning device into an Apex outlet, click the gear icon for the outlet, rename it for its purpose like I did with the O's hit alarm, then add in a line that says, if pH greater than 8.5 then on, and push send. We'll use this a few times today, but you can tailor similar lines for your warning siren to come on for any alert you find valuable in catching, no matter what you're doing. Next up, immediate notifications for the major elements calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium, which are one of the most overlooked alerts and notification that your tank can warn you about, and only recently came about within the last couple of years. It would be a mistake to not consider real-time calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium monitoring as an evolutionary leap forward in our hobby and a huge leg up for catching and solving major water chemistry parameters quicker than we've ever been able to before. So we're obviously talking about the Neptune Trident here, but what exactly can you gain from monitoring the major three elements multiple times a day? What should you go looking for when one of them's out of range? Well, the first thing you want to do after setting up a Trident is use the probe alarm task function for each calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium probe to set the min and max ranges that make sense for your specific setup. For me, that's 375 to 500 for calcium, 8.0 to 10 for alkalinity, and 1200 to 1450 for magnesium. Now that those Trident alarms are set, what can you expect when one of them is triggered as being too high or too low? Let's break down the checklist for the high-level alerts first with two-part dosing, kalkwasser, calcium reactors, or a combination of the three. Then we'll do the same for low-level alerts and what you should be looking for when any of these notifications hit your phone or email. All right, so you got two-part running on your tank and you get a high-level calcium and alkalinity alert. Here's the questions I'd ask myself. Did my dosing pump fail or is it stuck on? Is my dosing pump siphoning two-part directly into my tank? Did I accidentally leave my pump outlet on and forget to switch them back to auto, which is something that we did on the BRS 160 and Ryan Z170? Or specifically, if I get a high calcium alarm, did I accidentally mix my calcium solution too strong? For you kalkwasser users, although you might catch high-level calcium and alkalinity alarms before by pH, if a Trident alarm came in for either one, I would still ask myself, is my reservoir siphoning into my tank? Is my tank leaking and my kalkwasser ATO is on? Or am I mixing my kalkwasser solution too strong for my coral's demand, and do I need to dial it back a bit? If that high alkalinity and calcium Trident alarms came in and I had a calcium reactor set up, is something wrong with my regulator? Like, is it stuck open or did the bubble count increase, making the effluent more concentrated? Did someone or something bump my effluent dosing pump and crank up its flow rate? Is my effluent too strong, and do I need to dial it back to match my coral's demand? So regardless of which of these dosing scenarios applies to you, if you notice calcium and alkalinity trending upward, meaning that your corals are consuming less than normal, and you've ruled out some of these potential causes, it's also time to start thinking about what changes led to decreased consumption. Like, was there a major stressful tank event recently, such as did my temp get too high or too low? Did you recently make a change to lighting or flow that your corals didn't like? Was there a change in water chemistry, like a large fish death, filtration failure, or some contaminant that might have gotten into the tank? Did you recently frag or remove a bunch of corals? Now let's talk about that low-level Trident alert for calcium and alkalinity, where your corals might not be getting enough or something else is going wrong. Starting with reefers who use two-part dosing, if you wind up with a low calcium and alkalinity alarm, I would ask myself, is my dosing pump broken or has it failed? Did my dosing lines get pinched, kinked, or clogged, or are they leaking from a connection somewhere? Is my dosing container empty? Did I accidentally put the wrong dosing solution in the wrong container? Did I mix up my calcium or alkalinity too weak or make a mistake? For those of you who use kalkwasser in your ATO or with a stirrer and you get similar low-level alarms, the first things I would check are, is my ATO pump or tubing broken, jammed, or clogged? Is the ATO reservoir empty? Is my caulk stirrer no longer saturated? Is it depleted, or are its tubes clogged? Is there too much atmospheric CO2 in the room, or do I need to cover my caulk reservoir better? You can also use low-level calcium and alkalinity Trident alerts to more confidently troubleshoot your calcium reactor by asking yourself questions like, is my feed pump, dosing pump, or recirculation pump broken or clogged? Is my reactor media running low and does it need to be replaced? Did something change with my regulator or did it fail? Or maybe a more common issue, is my CO2 canister empty or nearly empty? Universally, with either of these dosing or supplementing approaches, if your calcium and alkalinity are running low and you're just not hitting the numbers you're looking for, the Trident can help. Usually consistently low parameters could mean that you're doing something right and corals are consuming more than you're providing, or you're not providing enough and need to step it up a bit, both of which are very easy to fix early to continue fueling that growth. It's that catching and fixing it early being the key here to continually maintaining stability in the tank year after year, and the more effective you are at that, the chances that your tank lasts well beyond the 2 to 3 year mark increase substantially. But there's far more to it than just monitoring pH, calcium, and alkalinity. We've only covered 3 of the 9 ways your Apex can act as your tank's insurance policy, and up next, we'll look at troubleshooting questions to ask yourself when you get those phone and email alerts for magnesium, temperature, ORP, salinity, PAR, and oxygen. But before we switch gears to help you find out what questions you should be asking for those alarms, let's wrap up the issue indicators that the Neptune Trident provides with high and low magnesium level alarms, which we already set up in the probe alarm task function earlier. Probably one of the most common mistakes made in this department revolve around questions such as, did I accidentally add calcium or alkalinity instead of magnesium, or did I mix it too strong or too weak? Did I enter my parameters into the BRS calculator wrong? Am I adding too much or too little magnesium for what my corals are uptaking? Is my magnesium on the dosing pump and did the pump fail? Or for some of you with calcium reactors, is there enough or too much magnesium media in the reactor? So you've invested a lot of time, sweat, and budget into your Reef tank this far, and I'm certain we've touched on something that speaks to you and the ways you want to protect your investment, but often overlooked is the dissolved oxygen in your tank. If you spend a fortune on your fish and the possibility of losing them is out of the question, the PM3 and dissolved oxygen probe can be your saving grace. We'll likely dive deeper into this one in another Master Your Apex episode, but once you have your probe and PM3 module connected and you use the probe alarm task function to set up alerts, you can use those triggers to develop a series of checklists like, did something happen to my power heads, or is my gas exchange in circulation enough? Did my return pump fail? Do I have too many fish in my tank? And if you're treating your entire system with some pest eradication dose or fish medication, did those medications cause a drop in dissolved oxygen? And do I need to do something about it immediately? Low dissolved oxygen is a silent killer, so if you have invested a lot in your fish, this real-time oxygen monitoring tool might be extremely valuable to you. Now let's talk about ORP, where some reefers may consider ORP to be an arbitrary parameter to monitor, while for others, that ORP alarm may have saved their tanks from potential disaster. When it comes to helping your tank bridge the gap beyond the 2 to 3 year mark, a better safe than sorry approach will likely yield a much higher chance of success. So in that spirit, let's set up our ORP alerts and notifications and what to do when one of them arise. Setting up ORP monitoring is just as easy as we did for pH, calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium, where you find the probe alarm task function, choose your ORP probe, and choose a min and max range specific to your tank's normal fluctuations, which your Apex will refine suggested levels for you after it's had a few days to gather some historical info. So once you have those ORP probe alarms set up and running, should your tank send you an alarm that ORP was climbing or falling well outside of the normal ranges, immediately my mind would question, are all my fish, anemones, and large critters accounted for, alive and kicking, or did something recently die? Did someone or something like my auto feeder dump a whole can of food into the tank? Did a power head fall off and take a nosedive into my old dirty sand bed? Have I been slacking too much on my regular maintenance, and is the water quality suffering? And if you're running ozone on your tank, did my ozone generator die, or is it set too high? An added insurance protection like this that already comes with the Apex would be a waste if we didn't take advantage of it. Next, we're going to cover 2 other included parameter monitoring tools that are just as simple to set up using the probe alarm tasks, and quickly cover the related checklist of issues to look for if and when your salinity and temperature alarms get triggered. Starting with your Salinity probe, again, find the probe alarm task function, choose your Salinity probe, and adjust your minimum and maximum salinity ranges. But for me, I'll stick with the Apex recommended 32 to 37 parts per thousand, although this is one probe I would come back to calibrate and also diligently follow the recommended install steps to ensure it's reading as accurately as possible. So now not only do you have a tool that you can check in on with a quick glance at your Fusion dashboard, but if you receive a high or low salinity alert, you can also quickly track down the source of the issue by looking at things like, is my tank or sump actively leaking and my ATO's backfilling it with fresh water, or is it broken or siphoning or dumping RODI into my tank? Did I forget to refill my ATO reservoir days ago and the tank salinity's climbing? Did my auto water change setup fail, like the tubes are clogged or the saltwater bin's empty or the dirty water line got pulled from the sump? Did I mix my salt water too concentrated or not salty enough? Or did I accidentally put salt water in my ATO reservoir rather than fresh water? Temperature is next, and if you've seen any of our heater temperature videos or watched our top 20 heater mistakes, you know just how important it is to protect your tank from a heater or temperature related issue, especially since a heater failure is likely the #1 cause that sends reefers out of the hobby for good. This is one alarm and notification that you don't want to miss, so with that in mind, let's first set up the probe alarm task function for your temperature probe by choosing your probe, changing the Apex recommended ranges of 75 to 82 if you feel the need to. However, those are the ranges that I would recommend sticking with as well. Since that temperature alert is so mission critical, I'm also going to add this one into the outlet for the loud horn, radio, or Audible warning device that we set up earlier by clicking on that O's hit gear icon and adding 2 new lines that say, if temp less than 75, then on, and if temp greater than 82, then on, so no matter what we're doing when these things go wrong, there's no chance that we miss it. I think the obvious questions you're going to ask yourself the instant one of these temperature alarms are triggered are, did my heater die or is it stuck on? Did I leave my heater outlet on by accident? Did my heater controller fall out of calibration? Or is my heater enough to keep up? However, there's other temp-related events that could be at play here that you might not even thought to check, such as, is my furnace or AC on, off, or even working at all? Did someone forget to shut a window? Is it just a super hot day and I need to add a fan quickly? Did my fans or chiller or hood ventilation stop working? Also, a separate probe in your display tank could also raise the question, is my return pump working and circulating warm water back into the display? Catching these in time could help you avoid your tank being added to that negative statistic column. There's one thing that I bet most of us have never thought about monitoring before, but actually has a real benefit beyond just dialing in your tank lights, and that is PAR. Sure, you could go out and rent or buy a PAR meter, use it once or twice to set your lights to optimal PAR, then toss it in the closet for a while. But that only gives you a single snapshot of a tank parameter that your corals depend on every single day. Monitoring that piece of life support can ensure that it's actually doing its job day in and day out. So that PAR monitoring kit is the right tool for this specific purpose, and all you need to do to utilize it is plug your ASM module to your Apex, PAR meter to the ASM, set the PAR meter in the best spot for your tank, like behind the rockwork or right on top, and you're set up. You can now pull down the new PAR graph tiles from the unused tile tray, and within seconds, you're monitoring PAR. Now you can set this up for alerts and notifications using a virtual outlet and your email outlet. I'll cover setting up a virtual outlet in another episode, which is super easy to do. But if you've seen that episode or have a good idea how to do it, here's what those lines look like for both outlets that basically tell my PAR meter to trigger an alarm if it notices that my lights are on during the times they should be off. If you have the PMK hooked up on your system, I highly recommend setting up this feature, but in either case, you now have a historical graph that you can look at to follow PAR trends or alerts that will raise the flag of troubleshooting questions like, are my lights stuck on or off? Are my bulbs getting worn out, or do the reflectors need to be cleaned? Or completely unrelated to your lights performance, is my water getting dirty, or does my carbon need to be replaced because PAR is trending downward? I'll tell you, beyond the immediate notifications for any of these scenarios your tank might run into over the next 5 to 10 years, there's still a few other priceless gems tucked away in your Apex that help you follow and identify trends if you harness the power behind chronological graphing. Not only does each of these probes and sensors we talked about today each have their own graph with up to 3 months of historical data saved, but you can overlay one over the other to help you drill down even further into cause and effect relationships like, are these ORP trends related to that day that my skimmer cup completely overflowed 2 weeks ago? Did my pH change on average when I increased my alkalinity from 8 to 9? Did my alkalinity and calcium change when I increased the par for my lights, ran them longer, or changed them out completely? It's really that last one that we are still on the cusp of fully exploring as a reefing community, but although it revolutionized calcium, alkalinity, and magnesium monitoring, you don't need a Trident to follow major element trends in your tank. Find out how to monitor them manually in this video right over here, or explore the massive possibilities your Apex is capable of and more in the entire Master Your Neptune Apex playlist right here.